Hello, today I'm having Stefan with me, and we're gonna do something special that I've never done before. So it's going to be something weird with GitHub and iOS development. So Stefan, could you please introduce yourself a bit and present what you'd like to do today?
So hi, I'm Stefan. I'm normally a Ruby developer, but today we're gonna do something in iOS that talks to the GitHub GraphQL API and shows us our repositories and the pull requests in those repositories. Basically, we're going to build a very simple application with the GitHub GraphQL API on iOS, and if we have time, maybe throw a bit in of RX in the mix to make it even more interesting. For me, I've been playing with various technologies through my career. I've probably spent the most time in Ruby. I've been doing iOS on the side for a while now, and in the past life I did a lot with Java, but that's way behind me now.
Okay. So let's see. Let's look a bit at what you prepared.
Cool. Prepared is a strong word for it, but let's do it. Do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, please.
I guess you can see it. Cool.
Yes.
So I've essentially prepared a pretty much empty iOS application that just has a few libraries in it.
Can you just zoom a bit, please?
Oh, sure.
So,
sorry.
And make it full screen so that I have a good image.
Cool.
Great.
Do you see it now?
Yeah, great.
Awesome. So right now it's like a bare bones iOS application that pretty much does not do anything. And we are going to populate it with my repositories fetched from GitHub. And then when you click on a repository, you'll be able to see the pull requests. And when you click on the pull requests, you'll be able to see some details. Now, you mentioned earlier that you have not used GraphQL before. Yep. So do you want to start there?
Yes. Let's see what this is.
Cool. So essentially, it's a technology to do APIs, and it's very, 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 very useful when you're doing client server and you're controlling both of them. Now, it can work when you're not controlling both of them, but it's really nice when you are. For example, in Receipt Bank, we have a web application that's gradually changing to React, an iOS application, and an Android application. And all of them can use the same API, and there's so many advantages in using GraphQL. But let's actually dive right into it.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, you still talk to the server over HTTP, but and you still get back JSON. But instead of having predefined endpoints that you can query, one to get all repositories, one to get all pull requests in a repository, essentially the server specifies a strongly typed schema that represents a graph of objects, and you make a query fetching only the stuff you're interested in. So what we're looking at right now is the GraphQL Explorer for GitHub's GraphQL API. I believe everybody's familiar with GitHub. Mm-hmm. So to give you an example, we start with the query, and there are a bunch of top-level endpoints. There's one here called viewer that would return a user, and that user would be me. And the user has a property login. I think I skimmed over it. There we go, login. And as you can see, everything is strongly typed. Mm-hmm. So query.viewer is a user, and query.viewer.login is a string. And when I run it, you get my GitHub handle right here. Now, the response is pretty much JSON. Actually, it is JSON. while the query is written in a special language called GraphQL. It's nothing really that fancy. It's just a string that lets you define which part of the objects you want. Now let's do something more interesting. Apart from getting the login, let's get all the repositories I have access to. Or actually, let's just get the first 10. Now, whenever you do paging, it's a bit weirder. So I'm just going to show you the results. I'm going to get the names of the first 10 repositories I have access to along with the owner. And I'm going to get the total count of repositories I have access to. And since this allows me to fetch multiple pages to do pagination, I can also see whether there's a next page, as in if I want to get the next page for repositories, is there one? And there we go. Now you see a bunch of repositories I have access to. You can see that I have access to 39, or maybe I have 39 in my account, I'm not sure. And yeah, there is a next page. And just to illustrate how paging works, it's cursor based. So I have to take this cursor here and do after, and then the cursor. And this will get the next page. You see the first one is called slide event. Now we go into something else. And if I keep doing this, eventually I am going to run out of repositories. I think there's one more page. And there you go. His next page is false. So those are all. Another thing to note is that the structure of this JSON response mirrors the structure of this query. The top level is viewer, and then we have repositories, then we have nodes, and then we have name with owner. And again, everything is strongly typed. So if you look at the documentation for this query here, repositories, it takes like a bunch of parameters like after and first, how many, and like what was the last cursor, new if you want to start from the beginning. It returns a repository connection, and in that repository connection you can see the total count, the page info, and the array of repositories. And then you can see that each repository would have like a name with owner somewhere here. Name with owner. Cool, makes sense?
Yeah. Sounds very interesting and useful.
Yeah, so like the really big benefit here is that once you've built enough of your API, you don't need to talk to your mobile developers anymore. Whenever they need a new query, they can do it themselves, and as long as you've implemented it on the backend, they get it automatically. You don't need to go and create a fine-grained thing. For example, if I wanted to get the first 10 pull requests of each repository fetched, actually, let me demonstrate that. So each repository will have pull requests. And again, we have the same thing. There should be a arrow here. I can again do it with just one query.
Yeah.
And now you see that this guy has no pull requests. Yeah. This one you cannot do in GitHub's REST API with a single query. You need to perform multiple queries. One to get all the repositories, and then one for each repository to get the first 5 pull requests. So it can help you minimize the number of queries you're making. Additionally, this is a very small payload. If you instead try to get if you try to go for the GraphQL, for the REST API of GitHub, they're going to give you a very big payload that looks something like this.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's a lot of useful stuff here if you need it, but if you don't, it's just a huge payload that your client is not going to use.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, there are some nice, interesting implications on the clients as well. Especially if you're, let's see whether we're gonna be able to get into that. But to give you a taster, when you're doing a single page app, normally you have a store. The store shows your current data, and you update it when you make queries and make changes. If you were using React, traditionally you would be using something called Redux that implements the store.
Yeah.
Since the schema is strongly typed and has like some nice conventions around how you should use the API, you can essentially do away with Redux and get the store for free from like this library I'm using here to interface the GraphQL client called Apollo. Don't worry if that didn't make sense. When we it will hopefully a bit further down the road when we do something with it. The final thing I should maybe explain in GraphQL is how do you perform mutations, how do you perform changes. So essentially, interactions are split into queries where you read stuff and mutations where you change stuff. And the query can be pretty much anything. You can pick any part of the graph exposed by the API. Mutations are a bit more traditional. They are essentially like doing RPC. You have one top-level call for each mutation you want to do. And let's pick stars, for example. Let's pick stars. So I've started my own repository called Playground for some reason, but let's unstart it. And then let's use GraphQL to start it. So I would need the ID. Now you can see the IDs are a bit weird, but never mind that. The reason they're weird is that with GraphQL it's very useful if they're globally unique. And this one should be a base 64 encoding of a string. Let me just demonstrate this. I never remember whether it was B to A or A to B, but let's try them both. So there you go. So it's actually a base 64 encoding of the name of the model and some actual ID in the database. That's really not important. You should treat IDs as opaque, unique strings, but people normally just like base 64 encode something. I guess this is the GraphQL version, for example, of the API or something. I don't know. But it's like pretty common to see this in GraphQL. Anyway, let's pick this repository ID. And the mutation should be called add star. We have it
add star
here.
Yeah.
Add star takes an input, and the input takes something starable, in this case a repository, and never mind client mutation ID. And it also returns the starable thing. Now, multiple things can be starable, but I know this is a repository. So I'm going to do this. And there we go. And now if I refresh, you can see that it's starred again.
Okay, kind of easy.
Sorry?
It's kind of easy to do that.
Yeah. The weirdness you see here is that multiple things in the API in GitHub's API can be starable, not just a repository. It can be a topic, which I guess is a thread in the... Actually, I'm not sure what the topic is. Yeah, I don't know what the topic is. Or it can be a gist. So we can actually use this to start a gist. But anyway, that's how you do mutations. Cool. Makes sense so far?
Yeah, makes sense. It looks like a nice tool to use also for other things.
Yeah. Cool. So let's try to interface this in iOS. Now, you can approach writing a client for this in two ways. You can just send strings and get JSON and then parse this JSON, or you can use some code gen. And traditionally, I'm not a huge fan of code gen, but it works really nice here. So I'm going to use code gen. Essentially, I'm going to define a set of queries, and then the library we're using, Apple, let me just show it. This one is going to generate types for my queries and for my responses. So the responses will just have the data I need, and all the data is going to be in the right type.
Okay.
And if you're using TypeScript, you'll do something similar. If you're using Android, you're going to do something similar. If you're using plain old JavaScript, then you don't need to do it. I've grown to like it, but yeah. So let's start with the query that returns all my repositories. I'm going to write it here first. And after I write it, I am going to copy it over to Xcode. So let's take the name with owner, and let's see whether I have started. Let's take those two things. Let me unstart this again, just to make sure that this is true. Cool. So yeah, let's do this. Oh, and let's take the ID. We always need the ID. So when I copy my query over here and then build, some code gen should run, and it should create some static types. We should have my query somewhere over here. Now, normally you don't look into this file. I just want to make sure it's here. And yeah, I see name with owner, so it's definitely here. And now let's use it. First, I'm going to just render them, just going to print them here. And after that, I'm going to create a table view that actually shows them. So I can do a pull client and then fetch. Here, it's my repository's query, and it should have been defined here somewhere. There you go, my repository's query. Oh, sorry, that's not how I call it. We've wrapped it into something. It's not really that interesting what it is, but fetch, and then my repository's query. There are no parameters, and then there's a result handler. So the block is going to be executed when the query finishes. I'm just going to do a print here to illustrate this. Basically, what I'm saying is that those things will print in reverse order because the controller loads initially, and then it performs a background. It spins off a background thread which will perform the query. Once the query is in, we'll get the results, and here they are. So you see that they got printed in reverse order. That's essentially how iOS works. Every time you want to perform network operation, you need to go away from the main thread and then eventually get the results back to the main thread to render them.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. Because that's the thread that's used for rendering, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you need to keep it fast.
Yeah.
Cool. So the result here is going to be of this type. That's a Swift type that either has like some object or some other object, and you normally use this for when you want to either return a response or communicate that an error has happened. It's kind of like the either mode in Haskell. The way to deal with this is to just like switch on it, and it can be a success, and you can print the data, or it can be a failure. And then we can print the error. Now, if I rerun, hopefully this query goes through and gives me a bunch of data. And there we go.
Yeah.
Now,
quite a lot of data.
Quite a lot of data, but that's why we did the code gen. So actually, let me call this response. It's a better name. So normally in GraphQL, you get two top level keys in your JSON: data and errors. I think I'll get errors if I just like mess the query up.
Yeah.
There you go. Now I have errors. It has no way to like. It's currently telling me that data is optional, but since this is success, I know that data is going to be there, so I'm not gonna handle this case. And then I have the viewer, and the viewer has repositories. And actually, before we do that, let's modify the query again. Let's put my login back here and compile.
It needs something.
It's just so yeah, it needs something. And now I have my login here as well. So let's print that. And there you go. You have my login. Now, it's a bit stupid and slow because of the code gen, but eventually it should stop telling me this error. Come on. Of course it has a login. Here it is. And that's the first thing about programming. The first thing about using Xcode and CodeGen. It's really weird. You saw that it works, but for some reason it refuses to compile. There we go, it compiles now. And now I think we can iterate here. Response viewer repositories, and then we can print each repository. Also, repositories.nodes. I know this is not no, and I know that this is not no. Now that one specifically is a problem with the GitHub API. There you go. Now I have all the repositories. So in GraphQL, each object would have a would know, or each field would know whether it's knowable or not. And this, for example, is not null, and this one can be null.
Yeah.
And essentially, when you get a list of repositories and get a connection back, you get an array of repositories, but both the array and the repository can be null in this spec here. Now, GitHub never returns null here, and their schema should have not said this. It should have said this to make them not knowable.
Yeah.
And then the code gen would have known that this cannot be null, and I don't need to write this bank here and ditto for here. But sadly, that's not what they have done. So again, instead of dealing with those null values, I'm just going to tell the compiler that I'm sure that they're not null. Cool, and that's essentially how we fetch the data.
Okay, so now we have data. What do we do with it?
Now we have data. Let's show it in a table view.
Okay, never done that, so for me it's like watching a show.
All right. Let's see. So there are multiple ways to do this, and with iOS 13, something new called Swift UI appeared. It's really nice. It kind of makes things look very reminiscent to React, and it's much simpler and nicer to do UI in iOS 13. But I've chosen not to go that way, mostly because I haven't learned it yet. I'm still dealing with iOS 12 applications. So we're going to use the old way. We're going to use storyboards.
Okay.
I'm just saying that so you know that there's actually a fresh, new, cooler way for doing that stuff. Cool. So a storyboard in iOS essentially can contain the views for a bunch of controllers that we want to render. And now that essentially doesn't render anything. Actually, let's do this in 2 steps. So you can see it in action. I'm gonna add a label here, and then I'm going to center this label in the middle of the screen. Then, and I always forget. Yeah, there we are. And then I can drag it to here. And I can call it let's just call it label for now. We're gonna remove it in a bit. Now I have access to this label in the code. I'm going to edit it here and just do waiting. And when we get the response, I am going to change this text to be my login name. Now, if I rerun the application, and there's going to be a memory here, but no, actually no, there's not going to be a memory here, so never mind that. And there you go.
Okay.
So that's how you essentially do stuff. You do your interface here in the interface builder. You do a bunch of outlets here in the code, and then you can, once you have those outlets, you can do stuff with them. For example, change the text. But let's not do a label. Let's do a table view. Now, the table view is a complicated class. Let's see how to do this though.
Sounds hurtful, like you'd hurt yourself when you want to use it.
I mean, you get used to it.
Okay.
Now, first we need to position it. And Have you done any Android, by the way?
Not something that would matter.
Yeah, fair enough. Is this enough? Okay, it's gonna look a bit weird like that right now, but never mind that. So let's rebuild, and now we have a bunch of cells. Let's populate those cells. First, I'm going to populate them statically, and then I'm gonna wire the network go here. So cool. Now, so you need a bunch of data, and then you need to tell the table view what data it has and how to render it. And in order to do that, you need to implement a protocol called table view data source. It has a bunch of methods. And the methods are one that returns the number of rows you have. And here we can return names.count. And one that configures the cell. So essentially, this one tells
table.
Yeah, the number of items, and here we get an index path, which is a reference, or which is the position of the cell. And we need to essentially return a UI table view cell that defines how this whole thing is going to look like. So what iOS does is, if you have like a really big list, actually let's create a really big list. It does not create a cell for each item in the list. Instead, it creates a cell only for the visible item, and then as soon as the cell moves away from the view, it goes away, and then it can be reused. So the next cell that appears is going to reuse the same object. And that's what we need to do here. And to do it, we need to do table view dequeue reusable cell. I'm just going to call it cell here, and then I can pass the index path here. We can configure the text to be, let's just be something for now, and return the cell. Now, if I run this, it should fail to compile because I need to configure this cell here somewhere. Actually, it didn't fail to compile. And the reason it didn't fail to compile is that I did not tell that table view that this controller is the delegate for the table view.
Oh, okay.
Makes sense?
So you need to wire it somehow.
I need to wire it, and I wire it from here. And now, this time around, it should crash.
Oh no.
There we go, it crashed. So here, there was like a way to register reusable cells, because you might want to have different cells in your table view. You might have like one cell that looks this way and one cell that looks that way. And if this is the case, you pass different names here for cells of type A and cells of type B. Make sense?
Yeah.
I feel there should be like a simpler way to do it, by the way, but whatever. Actually, yeah. We need to put the cell in here. And then we need to put the reuse identifier here, code cell. I think this should work. There you go.
Okay, many somethings.
Oh, many somethings. Now let's switch to this list here. And remember, we have this index path, so we can do names index path.row, and this is a string, so now it should be the full list of things.
Okay, and we have a scroll.
Yeah, we have a scroll. And finally, let's use the real data. And now this is where it gets like a bit weird. So this controller will get rendered initially without any data, and then the data will be loaded after. So I need to have something to render initially, and I'm just going to render an empty array.
And that happens if it's too slow, the connection is too slow, or just to show something, to show progress. Is that the reason?
Yeah. You cannot remember, because you cannot do the call on the background. You either need to fetch the data before you show this controller, or you need to show the controller. It needs to have something. There's a table view in it. It needs to render some data. And then when you get the data, you can update it. Now, in the meantime, you can show a progress indicator, or you can store somewhere on the disk the result from this query the last time you fetched it, and display it,
use it,
and then like change it immediately after the network response.
Yeah.
But let's not dwell into that now, because it's more complexity and it's not that interesting. Let's just implement it like this. Now, if I rerun it, it should be empty, because this is an empty string, an empty array. And then finally, let's just crash when networks fail. Don't do this in production, but it's good enough for here. And then I think we can just map this. And the way you do this in Swift is like this. And remember, this is not null. Actually, let me print the repositories again. We have self here. So now you see that the repositories are here, but they're not shown here. And the reason is that I have not told the table view that it has new data. So once this guy here was still empty, it called this method, it returns 0, it didn't render any cells, and that was it.
So now you need to update it.
I need to update it. And that's where Swift UI would have been nicer. But saying that we don't have it and we don't have combine, we need to tell the table view that it has new data. And in order to do that, we need to get the whole of it in this controller. Right now, we don't have it. So again, I need to do this. I need to take the table view, put it here. Oops. There's a specific key you need to press when you do this, and I always forget which one.
Okay, sounds esoteric.
Yeah, Xcode. And then finally, if I call table view reload date here, it's going to tell table view that it has new data. and it's gonna like call those two methods again and repopulate. Let's the private to be here. And there you go.
So these are the first 10 or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we got the first 10. Let's get the first 30. Let's get the first 50 because it's all of them. We can also do paging, but paging is a bit weird. Sorry, you need to give it some time to like properly compile. Actually, I think I messed up my build phase. Let me just fix it quickly. I think I need to move this guy a bit further up. Because it generates the code first and then compiles the API.
Yeah.
Or sorry, it compiles first and then generates.
Yeah, it should be the other way.
It should be the other way around. So let's test it. There we go. Cool. So we can go one of two ways. We can add a second screen that would show the pull requests in each one, or we can add a button to star and unstar them. I think it would be a bit cooler to add a button. What do you think?
Yeah, let's add a button. Yeah, I support that.
Cool. So we need to like put a button in this table view cell here.
So in each cell or on each row?
Sorry?
Or in each cell or on each row? How is it?
So each row renders a cell, and currently that cell is the default iOS cell that just has some text. But now I want to add a button, and now I need to create a custom cell.
Oh, okay.
And that custom cell should have this button. So actually, let's just take a switch here. It does not look like a star, but you know it's a star. And then let's take a
We can imagine it's a star.
We can imagine it's a star. Now, the next thing we need to do is lay out those folks. And let's say the label is here's a fixed trailing space. So did I say fixed leading space, fixed to top and fixed to bottom. Let's do the same for this. Actually, I think we can do it like this. There we go. Trailing, top and bottom. And that should be sufficient. Let me just look at the constraints. They have like some weird numbers here. Let's change them to whatever the default is. As I mentioned, iOS can be very annoying. And hopefully we have no warnings. We do have warnings. Now, we need to say what happens here if this label is too long. And what we're going to tell it is that I think by default it would shrink. Let's test it in a bit. Now, since I've created the custom view here, I also need to create a class for it. And just to save time, I'm going to put in this controller. I'm going to call it repository cell. Let's say UI table view cell. And finally, I need to wire those things up. So here I need to say that the cell is a repository cell. Nope. No, because I'm editing the label. I need to say that the cell is a repository cell. And let's rename the string to repository cell. Finally, if we go back here, and this is the repository cell. I know that this is a repository cell because that's how I configured it. And let's remove this line for a bit. And now when I run, I should see a lot of cells, and they should not have the right label because I have not configured it yet, but they should look the right way. There you go. Makes sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Now let's configure them. Again, we need to expose a few outlets. Let's call this name, and let's call this start. I like to keep those private. And we can either configure it here in this method, or we can like call a method on this cell, and I prefer to do the latter. So I'm going to create a function here called bind that takes a name and whether something is start, and it would set name. It would set the name, and then let's see. This one should have I should have a method, which I'm not sure what it is. Let's just Google it. Is on. And then we say that this is on if it starts. And let's go cell bind. We have the name here in repositories. And let's say all of them are start for now, because we're actually not fetching this from the API. And there you go. Wow. Although it certainly should have not looked this way.
It's a bit short. I don't know why. Why does it trim it?
I don't know. I don't know either. Let's see. So here we have name. Oh, there we go. This one is just stupid. And then it should be greater than or equal. Basically, I told it that there should be like 823 pixels between those two.
Mm-hmm.
And it works when this is exactly the text label. But when it's something longer, it doesn't.
Yeah,
then
of course.
It all went to hell. And now I'm just telling it that it should be that long.
Yeah, wow, looks great.
Cool. I just want to test what happens if this one gets a bit too long.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try this as well.
It should trim it, right?
Sorry, it should trim it, but I'm not sure whether I configured it properly. And I have not configured it properly. And the way to configure this properly should be to tweak an option here called content hugging priority. No compression resistance priority, I think. And if I just decrease this by 1, it should be enough. Again, layouts in iOS are weird. And there you go.
Okay, that's kind of magic. I don't get it what it does, but yeah.
Do you want me to get into it?
I don't know. Do you want to get into it? It depends on how much sense it makes.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's really weird to figure out initially, especially if you're used to CSS, where stuff, in my opinion, is so much simpler. But yeah, let's not go into it, because there will be something nicer we can do. The next thing I want to do is show actually whether this is star or not, and B, make a query to the server to like how to remove a star.
So now it just shows. If I push on that button, nothing happens.
No, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Like, there's just a button that flips. Also, by the way, if I click somewhere here, the row becomes selected. I don't really want this behavior, but we can turn it off later. Now, what I normally do in those cases, and let's start this one now, is I keep a to-do list of things I want to tweak.
Yeah, because otherwise you kind of forget about them. There are small things that you want to take into account.
Yeah, or you remember about them, but that's even worse, because now like you have so many things on your head.
Yeah, and then you forgot about the essential parts.
Yeah, so let's just start this. I call it backlist after can back.
Okay,
because that's where I saw it first. And let's just write it down and forget about it. Cool. So first we need to get the start from the API, and second we need to like pass it to this method. So first let's see. Oh, we actually have it here. So the problem is that I have an array of strings here, and I actually need my own repository object. So I can do one of two things. I can create a repository, and then I can have like a name here and a start here, and then those folks can be repositories. And by the way, I keep adding them in the same file, but that's not necessarily a good idea.
Yeah, probably at one moment you need to split them, right?
Yeah. But for demonstration purposes, let's keep them here. And it's name with owner, and here we have viewer has start. I actually don't need this stuff. So now I just map it. This is now a repository, and I can pass it here. This needs to be a repository as well. And I can do repository.name and repository.start. This is going to compile. There we go. And as we know,
Playground is not, or
it is not start, so that's why it was not start.
So all the others are start, but Playground isn't?
Yeah, apparently GitHub stars your project automatically. So if you open a repository yourself, you get start.
I see.
Let's see, this one is also start. Let's not start it. There are a bunch I've not started, I guess. Maybe it returns them in the order of starting. So I unstarted this one, Evans. Let me rerun the application. Now it's on start as well.
Okay. Looks like it's doing what it should. At least
cool.
Viewing.
Cool. I want to show you something cool, but I want it to be a surprise. And like this button here is not helping me. So I want to change it to something else. I want to remove it from a switch to a button, to replace the switch with a button.
Okay.
Because I don't want it to automatically respond.
So a button that will be inactive or active, or
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's gonna be active, but
active.
it's gonna have like different behavior.
Okay.
Depending on whether it's start or not start. But let me put the button here. I need to do this again. Trailing top and bottom. There's a better way to do this, by the way. So never mind my sloppiness in how I set up constraints. I promise that I do it better when I'm not on screen share. And then this one needs to be greater than or equal to, and let's go with the standard margin. Now I removed the switch and I add the button. So this guy here is no longer valid, and you see this by this empty circle here.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Because I just removed it. And then let me add the button. Just gonna call it star. And now if it starts, the button is going to say, what's it label? Title label is going to say on star. And if it starts, it's going to say star.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yep.
Text. Not sure this is the right one, but let's see. And that's not right. If repository start, that should be it. Sadly, that's not it. So there's an attribute here. Maybe it's title, no. And again, let's ask our friend Google.
So the editor doesn't help you that much.
It helps me, but there's so many options.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so even like that, it doesn't help you to filter through the options.
I'm just more used to this. It's easier to scroll. You know what? I think I've never actually changed the title of a button before.
Current title?
I think that's the one. Or maybe it isn't. It's a get only property. There's a method called set title. Maybe it's that one.
And that's a method.
Let's see. It has some options. I'm not sure what these options are for. No,
looks like it's too complicated anyway.
Yeah, but let's just like fight it. Well, there we go. It's a title on star for normal. I guess the other ones are the states when you press things and stuff.
Yeah. I was looking at it now as well. So yeah, I see that there are these states.
Yeah.
Like highlighted, like normal. Yeah.
Yeah. That's highlighted. When I tap it. Cool. Let's make it a bit nicer. This one. And this one. There might also be appropriate emojis, but let's go with the Unicode characters.
Yeah.
And there we go.
Yeah, looks kind of nice.
We have a button here. Now, we can also create a handler. So the next thing I want to do is perform an action when the user presses on the
So when you press on it, something will happen and will change to the other one, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly.
From unstart to start and vice versa.
Yeah, and I'll make a query to GitHub. But right now I just want to print something. And let's see how you do this. There's an event here. I think it was called touch up insight. The one you need to use. And that's essentially on button press. And let's go it on star. That's the button. I don't want any arguments. Cool. And here, this one should be printed in the console when I tap on a button. There you go. And just to make sure I'm getting the right thing, I am going to store the repository in this cell. Do it like this. And then we should see the repository name. There you go. It works now. Cool.
So that's a kind of debugging what you're doing now.
Yeah. I'm just making sure that like I got it right, because I don't get it right that often. Maybe you've seen that in my work style, but I very often like rerun things, just to I test things on every small change I make, just not to be surprised by a mistake I made 30 minutes ago. Now, normally I would write tests for this, but I have not figured out how to properly do TDD on iOS yet.
So you do checks tests like this. You do normal checks. So
it's not ideal, but the testing support here is really poor. Cool. Do you have any questions, or do you want to get this button to work now?
No, let's make it to work, and then I think we can wrap it up and have a debrief.
Fair enough. So before we do that, I defined the struct here code repository. But this query already has one. So if we look at my repositories query.data, it would have a viewer. The viewer would have repositories. There will be a node here. And in that node, actually no, that node is enough. And if I have an object of this type, it would have the response from the GraphQL API, name with owner, and viewer his start. And you can either wrap your responses in your own objects, or you can use the one that come from the code gen. and I tend to prefer to use the ones that come from the code gen. So I'm just going to replace this. I am going to typoize this to that because it's shorter, and actually I'm going to put the typoize here so it does not pollute the global namespace. And then I can just return the nodes here. I don't need to map them. Now I'm using the object that comes from the API. Okay, I do need to map them though, because they can be optional. And again, never mind. This is some weirdness from the GitHub API. Normally, you won't need to do that.
Okay, yeah, that looks weird.
Here. And now this is code name with owner. And this is code viewer has start. Cool. There's a bunch of things in GraphQL, something called fragment that would allow you to have this name something shorter. But let's not bother with it now. Let's do mutations. And again, the first thing I'm going to do here is write my mutations and then copy them over. We're going to do add star. And this is going to be, it's going to take one argument called ID. That's a string. It needs a dollar here. And then ID. Is this fine? Oh yeah, I need to fetch something here. For example. Cool, and then let's pass this variable. And this should star this repository. I didn't see which repository I took, though, so let's just see which one it is. It's called sleight of hand. I don't even remember what this is. It was a long time ago. It has no star, and when I run this, it started again. So this is my starring mutation. Oh yeah. Let's put it in queries. And actually, let's remove this. I don't need it. Then remove star. And I think this one is called remove star as well. And when I run this, the star has disappeared. So let's take it here. And again, I don't need our repository. Cool. And now, controller. If this is start, then I need to perform an unstarring mutation. Where the ID is repository.id, and otherwise I need to perform a add star mutation. And I'm going to leave the print. So let's see, sleight of hand is on start. Let me start it. And then playground is start. Cool. So let's rerun. I tap here, I tap here. And now when I refresh, this should be on start. And when I refresh, this should be start. There you go. And we only need to update the button.
Oh, okay, so now, yeah, the button doesn't update that. I was just looking at it and it was weird.
Yeah. And now we can come here and do something, but instead let's go back to the thing I mentioned earlier. Let's change this fetch to watch. I think this returns a result I can ignore. And then let me go and modify this and say viewer has start. I don't know whether this is going to be enough, but let's try.
So you use that to change the button.
It's apparently not enough though. So let's try to put this back here. And hopefully this should be enough.
Yeah, the idea.
And it's not enough. Damn it, I was hoping for a cool review. Oh yeah, I remember what the problem is now. There's a magic line I need to add in a PO iOS.
A lot of things here, I see that work on magic.
Yes, the best way.
Magic-driven development.
This one, I need this one. It's somewhere here in this network class. It would have been so much nicer otherwise.
There's client there at 14.
Yep. Although I don't think this is the problem. The problem is that now it does not know the type anymore. It needs a bit of help. And let's see.
Nope.
There you go. It updates now from the server.
Ah, okay.
And now that's the really cool thing I alluded earlier in the past. So when you make a query, it fetches all this data you have asked it for. But if it has an ID, it creates a normalized cache. It puts this ID somewhere else and then puts all those attributes mapped to that ID. So there's a cool way to see this in a PO for the web. There's not a cool way to see it in iOS, or at least I don't know it. But the point is that every time it gets a response like that, it would internally maintain a structure that looks something like this. ID,
so who keeps this?
The PO client, the library we're using. So it would keep a structure like that. And then when we perform a mutation, you notice that here I added viewer has start. So when we perform that mutation, we still get a response. There's still this ID, but this value is now changed when we remove the star. And it goes and it updates this cache to false. And finally, it's watch here instead of perform. Instead of performing the query once, it makes a query and then it stores this block somewhere. And then every time an object I fetched earlier changes, this box gets re-executed with all the data with the change applied. So essentially, this block would emit again. It would reload the data to the table view, and now I would see the new data here. And let me just illustrate this for you. Actually, yeah, here is fine. So it gets called once when it gets rendered initially, but when I tap here, it gets a response with a new value for that ID. It updates the cache and re-emits the block, and that's why we have this reload data here twice.
Yeah.
The second time was a result from the mutation. And in order for this to work, I need to have this line here. If I remove this line, it's going to stop working because the client is not fetching the new value of viewer has started anymore. And
so that's the magic.
Now, yeah, that's where the magic was. And now when I tap here, nothing happens. You can see that this repository is on start, or rather, actually, you'd see that when I restart the application, they're going to have they're going to be empty now. And bit for this one, Bulgaria, nice. So it's started right now. When I tap here, you would see that it's no longer start, but this one didn't update. And it all hedged on the fact that we fetched the data here.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's very useful because like if you have a screen and then go on a different screen where you edit something and you show it on the previous screen, if you get the new value in the result of the mutation you just performed and then you go back, you're going to have like the new value on the previous screen.
Yeah, you want to keep the data. I think that's very important for the user anyway.
Yeah. Like the really big key thing here is that I'm performing the mutation, but I'm not telling this button that it needs to change. And essentially, instead of like having to tell people that you've changed and they need to update their interface, you can like for the most part get it out of the box with this approach.
Yeah, looks really nice. How it should be in a way.
Yeah, and it's even better if you're doing it with React and not iOS. The Apple JS client is much more powerful. Cool.
Okay, so let's debrief a bit about what we've done. If you can switch back to your camera.
Yeah, just give me a second because I need to turn on some lights.
Yes, it's night now. Okay, so let's see what we've done. For me, it was very interesting to see that you worked in really small steps, even though you didn't have the option to make tests. I really liked that you were checking everything up front and you were looking at how things are working in step by step, even sometimes from more angles. So like checking it with the API, checking it from the real code. And I think this type of work will help you have flow. That's what I'm typically searching for, to have flows so you don't get blocked into, I don't know what I've done, and then, I don't know, search like crazy for half an hour, a few hours, whatever's working there.
Yeah, it's fundamentally test-driven development without the tests. And
yeah, again, exactly.
The only reason I'm not doing tests is because it's like really annoying in iOS. But I'll get there eventually. I just haven't dedicated the time. But yeah, essentially every time I start with a new technology, and this is a new technology for me, I postpone the moment where I get like really familiar with the tests, unless it's like really, self-contained. When there's no network and no UI, then I can go test first. But if you have like network and UI, and we have both of them here, it takes a while to figure out how to test them really efficiently, and TD did them really efficiently. and I have not figured that out yet. And in order to figure it out, I need to figure out the technology, and I'm still figuring out the technology.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, because if you want to make tests, I think you need to understand the technology first. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to know how to test or how not to test something, because, well, how can you test if you don't know how the system works inside, in its deep guts?
Yeah, or somebody needs to have created a test harness for you.
Of course. Yeah.
Somebody is me, and I have not done it yet.
But even like that, sometimes you see those languages that have it, and then it's very difficult to understand how it's working, or it's just by magic and it works, but then something doesn't work and you don't know how to fix it, because it's someone did something very smart, but it's somewhere in the deep parts of the technology. So I think even like that, it's better to learn the technology and then understand how to test it.
Yeah, I agree. What else did you notice?
I liked that you were also very focused on step-by-step doing things. So from, let's say, the progress point of view, you were doing first the list, and the list was you wanted to see that, then the button, then you changed the button to the image. So you always had progress. That's what I'm saying. And at the end, you had something working, and with a good iteration, because I quite often see people get stuck with I want to make this thing the nicest possible, and then they do, I don't know, many hours of work on UI or colors and so on, but they forget about that. Hey, you should have maybe a screen done, get feedback on it, and then continue with the rest, the colors or the styles and so on.
Yeah, that's really key as well. Also, normally I would make small commit messages along the way. Mm-hmm. I didn't just want to spend any extra time on it, because it took us so much time to set this up.
Yeah.
As you saw in the non-recorded part, it was really not trivial.
Yeah, I think people are, well, at least people who work on this, it's really crazy. I mean, how much did it take? 45 minutes, 50 minutes to set it up?
Yeah, in all fairness to the technology, there are actually better tools. I was using something called Cartridge, and in retrospect, that might not have been a good idea. It's a bit easier with CocoaPods. But that's what we use and what I know. So one of those days I'm going to learn Cartridge as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what else? I think that you also mentioned what you were not doing as you'd like to do, like setting that maybe it's better to have more files and structure those. But I think that I would have done the same, like have everything in one place. It's easier to look it up rather than split everything in many files and then ask yourself, where was that, in which file? So first make it work, and maybe now would be the moment to try and split it and kind of refactor it so that it's better from this point of view.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's also how I normally work. Actually, I would create a big file up to a point before I start splitting, just because it's more convenient, and then you can split it afterwards.
Yeah.
Just as you said.
Yeah, I think it helps you with having this flow in a way, because otherwise, again, you might block yourself and ask yourself, where was that? And then you want a break or something because you don't know where things are anymore.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on the editor as well, because I've really nailed the navigation in my Vim, for example, and it's fairly easy for me to find the file I want to open.
Yeah, of course.
But text code is not that convenient, and because it's not that convenient,
exactly, because it's also about the technology and how well you know it. Or I don't know, if you work with it, you already have this instinct and say, okay, I'm gonna do that. I know my file will be there, so you don't lose the time. But having a new technology, I think it's a lot better to do that. Of course, if you have this instinct and you have your ways of doing stuff, this won't matter anymore. Like you said, what you said with Vim.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so how was it for you? Because first of all, thank you for a crash course into iOS. That was very interesting for me. I've never done that. But how was it for you?
It was good. It was good. I wanted to get to RX because it's like another different cool way to do stuff. Essentially, it's so what Apple tends to do is instead of you having to like wire things and respond to events, you give it like a callback, and it calls a callback when things change. And it works well when it's just stuff you're getting from the API. But normally when you have local state or something else, or you're doing network operations outside of Apple, you still have to do it by yourself. And if we went into RX, we could have seen how it can happen. It can happen with it. I'm really like excited about the technology. Apart from that, let's see. I was like mostly annoyed about how much time it took to set this initially.
Yeah, well, that was.
But apart from that, I did not feel like there were some big struggles or anything. I went for the UI switch instead of the button without thinking about what I wanted to show at the end. But then that was easy to recover.
Yeah, I think these things happen. It's natural. And maybe it was easier to use the switch in the first place. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's my problem with it is that it updates automatically, and I wanted to show you how Apple updates the values for you from the server.
Yeah, that's true.
And it would have been tricky with the switch. I mean, we could have done it, but you wouldn't have been able to see the magic because it would change from off to off, which
that would be weird.
Otherwise I did not spend as much time refactoring as I would have wanted. I was like a bit more focusing on like getting it to work, and essentially at the point where we stopped, I would have refactored a bit. Yeah,
that's why I'm saying as well that now it's the moment to start refactoring.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Anything else? Anything to share?
No, not really. We can continue this some other time with RX and fancy stuff if you want. But apart from that, I think
maybe even refactoring it.
Yeah, I think the things you identified are like the really important ones. And I mean, I don't know for other people, but the way I learned them was via doing TDD. I know that I didn't do TDD here, but I've done so much TDD that the things you mentioned, small steps, verifying that things work, like trying to have flow, trying to test everything very incrementally so I don't get confused, is essentially my TDD workflow, and that's how I picked that up. Before that, I was writing code much differently. And it's like way more efficient.
There's this like train of thought of people that they say you don't really need tests to do TDD necessarily, because TDD is a way of working that helps you or forces you in the beginning to have this incremental approach, so that you can do TDD without tests, because TDD is something else. It's just how you slice your problem and how you focus to have this flow.
Yeah, fair enough. Still, I prefer to have the tests. But
me too, because now it's very difficult to test if you start changing or refactoring. Now, how would you check that? You need to check manually again and again. So for that purpose, of course, it's annoying. But otherwise, I think there's no big difference.
Yeah, true. And having the tests just makes this faster.
Yeah, of course.
Because in theory, you don't need to wait for the simulator to start. You don't need to click on it. It was convenient that everything was on the first screen, but if it was like 3 screens deep, then it's an entirely different story.
Yeah, it starts being annoying.
Then it starts like it very quickly gets annoying, and then either you need to rework your controller so the screen you want to test becomes the first one, but because that's also annoying, you tend not to do it, and you tend to like click through every time. That tends to like slow you down even more. But I say in theory, because in iOS, in order to run your tests, you need the simulator to start, and then they get run in the simulator, and you wait for like an age for that to happen.
Yeah, that's not fast feedback for sure.
It's not fast feedback, and you couldn't see it today, but the compiler is also very slow. Especially if you throw in some RX where you really rely a lot on the type inference. And that was like another big thing in iOS for me. I recently realized how less productive I am because the feedback is not a second or two, but rather like 10 or 15.
Yeah, that can be annoying for me as well.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Cool. Do you have anything to add?
No. I think I would want to focus next time to try to refactor that maybe. That's what we've done.
Cool. Yeah, we can pick up from here and do some like fancy stuff afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So thanks for teaching me the first lesson of iOS and for pairing with me, and see you next time. So until then,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. So until then, have fun coding.
Likewise.